Hi everyone, it's Jim of Shiloh Hall. I want to do one last video for the day. I had I saw recently where someone had introduced what would be a new topic for me in the discussion of the Hebrew calendar day construct. They introduced the Damascus document, and I won't go into all the details. Um, he goes in and substantiates the position of the legitimacy for the Damascus document and related to both the Cairo Geniza documents as well as the Qumran cave fragments, and how it reads. But I don't need to support the case because I agree with this case. I think that we need to give for the Dead Sea Scrolls because I believe the Dead Sea Scrolls are the library, the found library of the Aaronic priesthood that had been deposed and had their operations centered around the Qumran, what would today be called the Qumran area. Back then it would have been Bethabara, and that compound. I also think that's where John the Baptist was operating from as well. Okay, but he discovered something and he was relating it to the start of a day, and I guess I will work with it from that as well. But I really think it's more of a discussion for keeping the Sabbath day properly than it is for the construct of a day properly. Let me show you what we got. So here's the passage that was introduced, and here is the Hebrew, the background, the Hebrew of the Geniza documents that was plugged into DEEPL.com, their translator. I didn't try to test the translation or send it into Google Translate or anything else. I just accept that this would be a reasonable translation to the Hebrew that we see up here. And it gives us the how it translated it. Here's the first Hebrew word, and of course they're reading from right to left instead of left to right. And so the first Hebrew word is on the Sabbath, another Hebrew word properly, another Hebrew word, no man shall be enslaved to work, then another Hebrew word in the sixth Hebrew word, days, Hebrew word, date, Hebrew word, until, Hebrew word, the exile, Hebrew word of the suns, Hebrew word, diameter, Hebrew word, above, Hebrew word, the horizon. And then he summarizes it without all of the interruptions of the Hebrew words. So just the English of that translation is on the Sabbath properly, no man shall be enslaved to work in the 6 days' date until the exile of the sun's diameter above the horizon. Now, the person that put this video together is saying, well, to him, this idea that on the Sabbath properly, no man shall be enslaved to work in the 6 days' date until the exile of the sun's diameter above the horizon is clearly stating that the Sabbath begins on the evening of the 6th day when the sun has fully set below the horizon. And I don't think, I don't really want to, I'd have to send you back to his work to really know what he's trying to say. But when he says the 6 days date at the sun going below the horizon, then this would be the very first part of the 6th day, separated by a whole day before the beginning of the 7th day. So I don't know if he's just doesn't realize he's not communicating, or maybe I'm the one that just can't, maybe I'm just not bright enough to get what he's saying. But I don't see how you can get this telling us that the Sabbath begins clearly on the evening of the 6th day when the sun has set below the horizon, because it should be that the Sabbath begins on the evening of the 7th day when the sun has fully set below the horizon, because in his construct, because he is working from an evening to evening construct, then that evening of the 7th day is the first part of a 7th day. Now, I think that he works into his position. I think he works in the Gregorian calendar and the world's calendar, where you can make a case that it is still the 6th day once you go on the Gregorian calendar anyway. When you go past evening, even though it's now the 7th day on the Hebrew calendar, it's still the 6th day and will be until midnight on the Gregorian calendar. I I can't necessarily agree that that's a legitimate approach to this, to any of it, because I'm not sure how the Gregorian or the world's calendar would have bearing upon the Hebrew calendar as laid out for us, as laid out for us. But that's really not the point of this video. I don't want to belabor that. Okay, so here is a representation of the sun's full diameter setting above the horizon. And so going back to our document, however it's reading here, and let me highlight here real quick if I could. It will let me. Oh, it's not going to let me, so I'm going to have to comment on it. But okay, on the Sabbath properly, no man shall be enslaved to work in the 6 days until the exile of the sun's, and this is what's key, of the sun's diameter above the horizon. So this passage is talking about the sun's diameter being above the horizon. Now, this person is saying set below the horizon, and he's got a different illustration, but I'm not going to go there. But we have this issue. What's introduced and what we haven't seen before is the sun's diameter above the horizon. And we have something that is related to that. So let me take you to the Dead Sea Scrolls translated by Florentino Garcia Martinez. This is one of the three major translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it happens to be my favorite. And I will say this particular person that put forth this information shows us the other two major translations, but effectively they are saying the same thing. There's nothing really significantly different. They're all really translating that passage we just read in a similar fashion. And let me read it for you. First of all, we have the Cairo Geniza, which Geniza that actually predates, at least in terms of being found, it predates the Qumran cave findings. So I think this was around 1897 that they found this, and this would be in the 1947, 48, 49, something like that. Doesn't mean that this is older, it just means it was found first. So this is how the Qumran cave fragment reads, and let me see if I can follow it here. Concerning the Sabbath, to observe it in accordance with its regulation, no one should do work on the 6th day from the moment when the sun's disk is at a distance of its diameter from the gate. Okay, so how they've translated this is that no one should do work on the 6th day. Okay, let me show you what that would look like on this timeline. Now, this is an evening to evening illustration because that's what I believe it's likely that the Dead Sea Scroll translators are operating from, as well as the person that is putting forth this information. So it's an evening to evening. And what they're basically saying here is the start of day 6, which would have started in the evening back here and run through the night. But here we are approaching, the sun's up during day 6, this would be Friday, and we are approaching the end of day 6. As I read Professor Martinez or Garcia, I think he's translating that passage to read that once that sun, and before, this would be, let me see if I can, this would be the start of the Sabbath, start of the day, evening, Sabbath. This would be the start of the day. But I think the way that Professor Martinez is translating this, he's saying that everyone should basically stop working. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. No one should do work on the 6th day from the moment when the sun's disk is at a distance of its diameter from the gate. So once the sun has reached its diameter and touched the horizon, it's time to stop doing work on the 6th day. In apparent, I have to infer here, but in apparent preparation for not working on the Sabbath day. Everybody who has tried to keep an evening to evening Sabbath day knows the stress and pressure of trying to wind down this work day so that when the sun goes down, you're done working. You're not getting your gas in your car, you're not buying and selling, you're not going to the store to get your stuff. You're done. You've got it all done. So everybody knows that we've got to start planning during that work day if you're going to keep an evening to evening day. And it almost seems like Professor Martinez is saying, yeah, you need to stop it. And the other two translations would agree. You need to stop what you're doing on day 6 when the sun gets close to the setting. So you need to stop there. That appears to be the apparent translation of Professor Martinez. And that I would say that the other two translations will follow that. But let's go back here. And let me clean this up a little bit. Let me see if I can get rid of all of this stuff. Let me tell you how I'm reading this, because it seems it's tough for me. When it says on the Sabbath properly, I don't argue that the context is about keeping the Sabbath properly, but this doesn't seem to be related to a man ceasing to work. It seems to be related to a man engaging in work. No man shall be enslaved to work. And when do people work? People work during the 6 days. So I think while the writer here is suggesting this has to do with the Sabbath beginning when the sun goes down below the horizon, its diameter below the horizon, I believe is what he's saying. But I don't really think this is related to the beginning of the Sabbath. I think this is related to the end of the Sabbath, because at the end of the Sabbath is when a man goes back to work. People go back to work. So when I read this as no man shall be enslaved to work in the 6 days, which was troubling when I first started reading this, because we don't normally see 6 days. This is a bit of a new language for me. We're usually talking about either the 6th day. We understand the 6th day, and that's how the presenter of this document, along with the translators, are choosing to take this 6 days date to mean the 6th day. That's what they're saying. But in every week, we do have a 6-day period of time. We have 6 days. That is the work week. We have 6 days we work and 1 day we rest. So it looks to me like this passage is much more about when a man can start to work after the Sabbath than it is when a man must stop working before the Sabbath. So no man shall be enslaved to work in the 6 days until the exile of the sun's diameter above the horizon. So I would say, to go back to this picture of the sun going above the horizon, there is if the sun were coming up, let's see if I can, I think I have it in the wrong order. Okay, so here would be, let's say the sun is behind the horizon and we're looking east, and it's now the full diameter of the sun is below the horizon, but then it begins to make its way above the horizon. Here it is coming up. Well, that would actually be the start of the day, in my opinion. That's the sunrise, and that's when we have now. Let me go back here, because this would be, and actually this is a penciled in illustration of the sun behind the horizon, but here is the sun behind the horizon without that illustration. But you can see the sunrise. You can see the sunlight in the sky. This is daybreak. This is dawn, and this is before. This is morning before the day begins. But when we get here, suddenly the day has started. We're no longer in twilight. We're no longer in morning or daybreak or dawn. We are in the new day, and then we have it coming up a little further, and we're still in the new day. We have the new day beginning, but according to the instruction to keep the Sabbath properly, no man can yet be made to go to work. So this can't go to work. This still can't go to work. This still can't go to work. It's not fully above the horizon. But then once the sun has fully crested, this is when a man can be enslaved and made to go back to work. That's what I think this is reading. So no man, let me just read it one more time. I know it's redundant, forgive me, but I think this passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls has much more to do with ending a Sabbath and when a man can go back to work, how you end a Sabbath, and has nothing to do with how you begin the Sabbath as it has been translated. So let me just read it again. To keep the Sabbath properly, no man shall be enslaved or made to work in the 6 days' date until the exile of the sun of the sun's diameter above the horizon. That's what I think this passage is all about. So if you think we are analyzing correctly and this information would be of value to you and other people, then please like and share so that the algorithms will be improved and others might see it as well. Thank you, and may you be Baruch.